Good day, everybody. My name's Carpo, and I'm going to make this video about L-Dopa, Parkinson's, and hallucinations. So it probably won't be too long of a video. Of course, it depends on your perspective. Usually my videos are 15-20 minutes long, so I definitely don't want to go in that far. But I'm going to be reading out of this book just a little bit. I find it fascinating, and I think that this is important because of the fact that as a person who experiments with various compounds and researches a lot about the effects that various drugs, as well as, natural compounds within the body and the effects that they have on the mind and the body, and trying to be honest about it, and being honest with myself in the sense that if something feels good or is a great, let's say cannabis, a person who smokes pot, and they say, well, it fulfills a certain component of my life, whatever it may be, or relaxes me, the question becomes, is it an over-relaxation? Because we know that cannabis affects the endocannabinoid system. So is it an overstimulation, or is it something that a person is actually maybe lacking and needs? And the same thing would be with, say, dopamine. And this is why this video became important to make for me, is because I've been selling Mucuna on my website for a long time now. It's always been one of my main herbs, and the stuff I have is, I think naturally it's, 4 to 6% L-Dopa, and the stuff I sell has standardized to 25%, so it's easier to accurately, do dosing and whatnot for people who need it. And I have a few people who reliably buy it all the time, and a couple of people buy it for their Parkinson's patients or people they know with Parkinson's. Now, this is, of course, getting into territory that I shouldn't be treading in, so I'm not going to be able to give any recommendations or say that it works or can do this or cure anything at all. So this is purely informative. Do your own research. It's, but many of the studies have shown that L-Dopa, which is the precursor to dopamine, is lacking. I should say, dopamine levels are lower than in a non-Parkinson's patient, and that by supplementing with L-Dopa, which is the precursor to dopamine, it gives the body more to work with. Now, I won't get into the science of it because I'm definitely not a doctor or a biologist here. But what I'm going by is the synchronicity that I bought this book. It just caught my eye online. Go figure. It's called Hallucinations, and it's by Oliver Sacks. And it was just written a couple of years ago. He also wrote a book called Musicophilia, which was about how music affects the brain, and another one who's called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. So I'd like to read both of those. And I believe he died recently, so it's kind of interesting. He's got some of his signed copies of the books, which are going for far too much money now. It's interesting. I don't know enough about the author to know what I think about him, because I just got this in the mail today. But I flipped open to a random page like I like to do, and this chapter was called The Delusions of Parkinsonism. And instantly I saw L-Dopa, and I said, I never see this in very much in books I read generally. If I'm reading a biological article or something online, that's different. But so I'm just going to go on and to show you where I'm coming from. Because hallucinations are a very interesting concept. There are various degrees of hallucinations, and I'm not talking about LSD trips. Those aren't considered hallucinations, generally. Those would be considered a morphing of the environment. You can look at something, and it may morph into something else. Or you may see the fractal nature of clouds, where patterns just grow and they become the same, or shrink down to the same pattern, or closed-eye visuals, which are different than seeing something and believing it's there and having it look and appear real. So, I'm just going to try to skip through. I haven't even read the whole chapter. I just wanted to make this video because it was so interesting before I forget. Okay, so the disease that now bears his name, John Parkinson, is one of the one that affected movement and posture while leaving the senses and the intellectual unimpaired. And in a century and a half that followed, there was virtually no mention of perceptual disorders or hallucinations in patients with Parkinson's disease. By the late 1980s, though, physicians had begun to realize, and only in response to careful inquiry, for patients had been reluctant to admit it, that perhaps a third or more of those being treated for Parkinson's experienced hallucinations, as Gilles Venedin and others reported. By this time, virtually everyone diagnosed with Parkinson's was medicated with L-Dopa, or other drugs that enhance the neurotransmitter dopamine in the brain. My own experience with Parkinsonism as a young doctor was predominantly with the patients I described in Awakenings who did not have ordinary Parkinson's disease, but a more complex syndrome, encephalitis lethargica. So I'm going to skip down here a little bit. These post-encephalitic patients were far more sensitive to the effects of L-Dopa than patients with ordinary Parkinson's disease. Many of them, once they were started on L-Dopa, began to have excessively vivid dreams or nightmares. Often this would be the first apparent effect of the medication. Several of them became prone to visual hallucinations, or visual illusions or hallucinations too. Now I find this fascinating because about 8 months ago I started taking L-Dopa, or I started taking Mucuna. Right now I have a blend of Mucuna, guarana, and cordyceps that I take each day. But I don't take the large, full, teaspoon or two that I used to take. Now, I would say 1,000 milligrams of L-Dopa will give me wild, vivid dreams. It's something I didn't expect, but after I'd had them, I realized, wow, I'm having these crazy dreams. It must be that. And so, in that case, we know that dopamine is linked to dreams, okay? And melatonin to sleep. And perhaps dimethyltryptamine plays a role in it either. We just don't know. And yeah, the speculation that it was produced by the pineal gland has been proven now in recent years. That the pineal gland does secrete DMT, at least in rodents, and we would assume in humans as well, and I believe there were a few human tests. Problem is, DMT, it breaks down too fast, and when a human cadaver, you can't test for it. So, anyway, I'll get on to this. So these people, it goes on to talk about people who are creating having these strange hallucinations that, their pants are walking around, or, other very interesting things. It was sometimes said that L-Dopa might make patients psychotic, but by 1975, more than a quarter of my patients with ordinary Parkinson's, while otherwise doing well on L-Dopa and dopamine agonists, had found themselves living with hallucinations. This one guy says he feels himself often on the verge of hallucination, and he may be pushed over the threshold at night, or if he's tired or bored. When we had lunch one day, he was having all sorts of what he calls illusions. My blue pullover on a chair became a fierce, chimerical animal with an elephant-like head, long blue teeth, and a hint of wings. A bowl of noodles on the table became a human brain, though this did not affect his appetite for them. And so I'm going to skip a couple of pages ahead. Yeah, it's fascinating. I was just shocked with, wow, there's so much information in here about L-Dopa, dopamine, and Alzheimer's. So, of course this video will turn into a forever if I keep reading, but to get the point across, it seems that L-Dopa will affect not only our dream states, but in certain patients it may cause hallucinations. Now my belief is that the hallucinations, because on the very verge of sleep, in that hypnagogic state, it's one of my favorite states, very highly desirable. And if I take certain herbs, certain doses, and just close my eyes in the afternoon without falling asleep or being tired, I can have very interesting dreams on the edge of consciousness that are fascinating to me. And you see these fixed patterns and ideas and thoughts, and they're real visuals, almost in the room. I have one friend who actually has sleep paralysis, and he told me all about waking up and feeling like he's pinned down, not being able to see, and not being able to get up, but seeing this thing standing over him, but knowing he's totally awake. And I'll tell you, there was one day where I had a very, very amazing experience like that. And to be honest, I was taking a substance my friend had given me. It was Subutex. Subutex is an opiate agonist or antagonist. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but it's for people to help them come off of opiates. And my friend's been taking it for a long time, and he actually, he gave me a whole one, and I said, just give me a quarter of one, because I had extreme back pain, and I had no painkillers. So I took it. It kept me up all night in this crazy, weird. But anyway, I had the other quarter of one. I went camping. I had my really bad sciatica, and so I thought I'd take some. And I remember taking the quarter of one and sitting in a chair. I may have taken a Valium or something, who knows. But whatever combination, whatever situation, it just put me in the right state. We're sitting in this chair looking into the woods. It became so surreal. I sat on the edge of sleep where I could tell that I was awake. It was almost like I couldn't move, but I understand it was sleep paralysis in one degree or another, and it was affected by what I was taking. So here we have an opiate giving me the same effect that L-Dopa is giving people, and we know that dopamine plays a role in feeling good and rewards. So I cannot draw conclusions or make a connection here. I'm leaving this open, and I'm giving you the information as people that I've read and experienced, and wondering what the input you all might have on this to see exactly if your experiences may resonate with some of the ones I've heard. Because if anyone out there is taking L-Dopa or supplements like that, and there's also carbidopa, which is taken with L-Dopa to supposedly increase efficacy, but that may have its own effect, completely separate. And yeah, I won't get into irrelevant aspects of it, but relevant, but for a different video. So we have an interesting idea here about hallucinations and delusions. And some of these people are obviously in their normal waking life, they're very coherent and functional, and this is what made it the most interesting. They're not people who are out there saying, I'm seeing this and it's real. These are people who see it and recognize that their brains are causing these delusions. But some of them won't admit it for several years until they've discussed it with other people who have had like-minded experiences, and to where they won't feel dismissed. In other words, people who feel respected or have an obligation in their society, whether maybe they have an important job title, or maybe they're just plain scared to be ridiculed by their own family, they don't talk about their experiences, and this makes it hard to know. But one thing I would like to add to this is kind of a point I'm making here, is how fragile the human mind is, and how likely we are to create delusions and to buy into those delusions. In the human mind, there's a phenomenal show that was called Mind Games a while back, and they would put people in situations where they would be convinced they saw something, but really they were shown a different card, and all these magic tricks or illusions. And some of them wouldn't even admit. They're like, no, you showed me a different one, We are so prone to defend ourselves and convince ourselves that we're right and that what we see is correct, that we're afraid to just say, maybe I was hallucinating, because that opens you up to feeling crazy, right? I believe this is what's happening in a lot of these things on the internet and elsewhere. Of course, the internet being the main communicating ground, we have folks on there who are the flat earthers, and we have this thing, like I talked about the other day, with the Mandela effect, which is a very revealing look into how we create patterns and see patterns that may or may not be there, but that we can pull them all together and create what I would call like a mental hallucination or picture of what's going on. Of course, that's not defined as hallucination, but many people take it to the level where they believe they see things that may or not be there. If a person has an idea in their mind of what they may or may not see in a situation, and they're under the influence of something, it may influence what they see, such as a person under a heavy psychedelic trip might see monsters, or they might see angels, depending on the state of mind. So a person who is already in a negative state of mind, and there's another little paragraph in there I wanted to read, but I couldn't find it, about how people who are unhappy in their lives, people who feel cornered, they feel threatened, or they feel unloved, are the ones most prone to attack mainstream thought and to create a complete delusion about what's going on in the real world, such as, why should I even define it? I've done it a million times. There are a lot of crazy beliefs out there, and if you question them, the people will attack you as an agent, a shill, a reptilian, Illuminati agent, whatever. I feel very sorry for those people, because they think that they're awake to some reality, but in reality, they're closing their eyes to reality, to the world that's around them, the real world. And to admit that we're creating our own hallucinations can be very important sometimes. And I use hallucination and delusion loosely here in kind of conjunction, but it's because our minds are fragile and we tend to make things up to fill in the blanks. So it's very difficult not to. But I guess there's a dual video here. In one way, I wanted to inform people about L-Dopa and how it may affect you if you take it. And if you're a person who takes L-Dopa and has hallucinations, consider that. And many medications can cause hallucinations. So, thoughts to consider. Taking L-Dopa for me as a non-Parkinson's person, it does give me crazy dreams. I don't have nightmares, but I have crazy dreams. And it also gives me strange hypnagogic edge of sleep dreams, which can be rather enjoyable. So, anyway, happy explorations, everyone.